100%. We've all said we don't think that's realistic. That's not, that's, you know, that was a policy that was adopted years and years ago. It's time to change. That's not a problem.
Setting the percentage is difficult to do. But I mean, look at the stage, for instance, in their instance, just use that as a case in point. Pick 70%, 80%, 50%, whatever. He's got all the percentage now. He has all the percentage.
Yeah, I think there ought to be some adjustment of number of
and that's
number
really
of
where
total.
things are kind of changing around, and where people are kind of have bought into a concept, and where there's a whole lot of change could still take place.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, even a residence or well.
Yeah, I think it ought to be something. I mean, if a majority of this board deems the change to be small enough
I think we're
to
driving
allow
it to
it,
too much, almost paranoia relative to, you know, to go to this formula and the fact that everybody's bedridden and can't come down here. I mean, golly, gee.
But before we finish, we cut, one of the the homeowner started to say something about you, and some of us cut you off. You said something about, we were talking about the internet, and you had said something about. Does not have, okay. Thank you.
and I can tell you, it is a misnomer that that folks over 50 or over 60 or whatever that number is don't use. I mean, it's
talking about was on the percentages, et cetera, and notifications. I think perhaps a decent solution would be that a notification be set out to each owner, because they're the only ones that can do anything about it, of the time and the place where the changes are going to be considered, and that there be some mechanism that send out some way where you get a return receipt so you know they got the darn thing, at least.
Well, there's a problem with that, and we are experiencing this. For example, sometimes we will send things that are heading toward municipal court, and just about a month and a half ago, we sent something out, and we never got the return receipt. We just got it back that they didn't get it. So 6 weeks can pass. The deadline's here and gone, and the meeting's been had, and it's still floating around out there waiting for signatures. The ruling is that if you send something first-class mail, there is the assumption that it is received. And I think one of the things is you need to clarify about, you need to send it physically to a property address. From the standpoint of, for example, there's been a transfer of property, and I'm trying to get a hold of these property owners, but that transfer may not show up for 6 months. And so I may be sending it, and that's not really who it needs to go to. And it doesn't necessarily need to go to Mr. and Mrs. Smith at 500 whatever. It can go to resident at 500 whatever. Yeah.
The issue still comes down, if you're not going to make some mechanism to ensure that the notice was delivered, then you're going to have to set some percentage, some sort of majority percentage that there's an agreement on this thing.
At the time that we went through that process with the committee to determine with rezoning, it was decided that for public notification purposes, only rezonings would be, there would be signage, partially because once a property is zoned something, there should be the reasonable expectation that it will be that someday. Whereas the zoning changes the reasonable expectation of what that will be someday. There's always, you know, and we even talked about this on the committee, it's like the signs get stolen, and yes, they do. There was a rash where we were putting signs out, and then we'd get the call that the signs weren't there, and, you know, or we didn't know that they, you know, had been stolen. But what we do with the rezonings is we send out a little postcard that says, check the Farragut Press. There's something coming up that you might be interested in. And we don't say what it is because we just use a generic postcard and we just send it to resident. We print them out.
Things you should think about is when you write your ordinance, I would suggest that it doesn't say something like any change can be made. You know, what it should say is something along the lines of, you know, owners may request changes that are not material. You know, some limitation that you start with that says, look, you're not going to, like I said, you're not going to build Eiffel Towers or 5-story buildings. What you're doing is asking for changes that are not substantial or not material, and those are the only ones you can come ask for. And over time, you will build up a body of precedents of what's substantial. And, you know, the staff will have it, you'll have it as members, and you'll just know what's substantial. You know, substantial means, you know, moving a road and eliminating 15% of the houses. I mean, whatever it is you end up with precedents of. And, you know, that's what I would suggest, is that you have your ordinance that says changes may be, you know, changes, and then whatever your definition of that are, you know, not substantial, that are in keeping with the character of the, you know, make some language up that defines what you can ask to be changed. And then if it passes this board with you know, with input from residents, it's done.
Would you volunteer to work with Ruth to effect those changes?
Yes, and I got some other suggestions too. I'll just give you a small example. Right now, and we've talked about a lot of things. Ruth's been very helpful in trying to say why things are there. Give you another example. Right now in Farragut, before I can start a clubhouse or before I can start a building on my property that I'm 100% financing, I have to complete all streets and amenities before I can move the first spoonful of dirt. That costs developers money because I got 4 or 5 months of building roads, and then and only then can I start building a house. If I'm building them for myself and selling them, the day I've got a road big enough to get a bulldozer in there, I ought to be able to build houses on my own accord that I'm getting ready to sell. And the way it ought to work, this is my opinion, the way it ought to work, I shouldn't get a certificate of occupancy for that house till those amenities are finished. And that can be part of your, but that's 4 months or 5 months of interest I've got to pay on a several $million-dollar loan because I can't start those houses. And there's no real, I mean, as long as the town's got the power of the certificate of occupancy, and that's the trigger, then that's the way, that should be, in my opinion, that should be the trigger that makes me have all my amenities and roads and streets in. And actually, there are some things that it's better to do before those roads and streets are in than when they're in. So there's a number of things that are in the statute that need looking at, and I don't volunteer to rewrite them all, but I'd be glad to work with Ruth. I mean, she's expressed that she's got some, you know, there's some things in the statute she would like to have more flexibility in, or that are a little archaic, or that, you know, Farragut's changed. I mean, 2 or 3 times, more than 2 or 3 times. But I'll put it out.
We're receptive, so think about doing that. But also that we're a little bit off the subject now, so
Yeah. Well,
let's return.
I'll quit.
So Ruth is going to put us together, or do we need more information?
I will make a stab at it, but it will be discussion purposes only next time also.
Okay.
With regards to that last statement, there are real reasons why we do that, and that aspect of it, I won't be going there with this particular modification. Let's just put it
But
that
again,
way.
generically, and it's not off
Yeah,
the
what-
subject, but we're, open to hearing how things are working or not working from all the perspectives, and then seeing what we need to do. But it needs to also be aired out to where we understand what the pros and cons are, so.
And it should be a continuous process.
absolutely.
Not wait for 5 years and do it over or whatever. Something we should be doing all the time.
Very well, seems like we're doing that too.
Are.
So this is going to be for discussion at the next meeting, which will be when?
December 16th.
Okay, you're hereby notified. December 16th.
Yes.
Third Thursday. We're lucky, it's actually early in December. We've had meetings fairly late in the month before.
This was for discussion purposes only, and she's going to get us some more information on this and come up with some more information, right? Okay, our next item, public hearing on proposed location of new utilities, and I think tonight there is actually something out there.
Yes, Daryl received a request from Lenore City's Utility Board. They've been experiencing some underground electrical conductor failures within Wood Chase Subdivision Unit 1. And in effort to solve the problem, they need to install new conduit conductor system in the road right-of-way and within the existing utility easement. So got this today, so this was perfect timing. That in Village Green not that long ago, other parts of Village Green where there were some problems, where there is underground electricity on the western end. I know that they have done it in Old Stage Hills. What this was this product was introduced, and it was said to last a minimum of 50 years, and it didn't. Is really what they're dealing with. And they have sent notices to property owners that would be affected, and this includes East Fox Den Drive, Heatherwood Court, Wood Chase Drive, Cedar Park Court, and Bay Tree Court. Now, I know from being a resident within Old Stage Hills that prior to them making this change, we had regular outages, probably almost on a daily basis at somewhere in the neighborhood. Not for like extended periods of time, but just enough to be annoying to always reset your clocks. And so they have been going through, and they replaced Old Stage Hills several years ago already. I mean, it's been quite a few years ago already. And wherever they have a problem, they are proceeding with making these changes. So
They do a pretty good job of notification.
that has been my experience, that they go out and notify folks. Now, like in my neighborhood, I am on the opposite side of the street of where the electrical lines were, but I know that my neighbors were notified when they did it. And so, before starting construction, LCUB is actually videoing, taking pictures like with a video of the areas that will be affected to assure that the areas are returned back to their original condition. So, just looking for approval of this tonight, and we recommend approval.
Motion? Second. All those in favor? Aye.